Obinna adjusted the cuff of his shirt as he walked into one of the most expensive restaurants in Lagos. The place glowed with soft golden lights, waiters moving gracefully between tables, and a live band playing slow jazz in the corner. Tonight wasn't about business, though that's exactly what he told his wife, Chinelo, before slipping out of the house. She had kissed him on the cheek, wishing him luck with his meeting, while he was already rehearsing how he'd smile when Amara walked through the door. He had planned every detail with care. A private corner table, away from curious eyes. A chilled bottle of champagne waiting on ice. 2 wine glasses that would soon clink together in celebration of a love he wasn't supposed to have. He even asked the staff to scatter rose petals across the white tablecloth and place a small bouquet of fresh lilies in the center, Amara's favorite. Obinna sat down, adjusting his tie nervously, not because he feared being caught, but because he wanted the night to feel perfect. This wasn't a quick escape or a careless fling. To him, it felt like a second life, one he guarded with lies as simple as, "I have a business dinner." The irony was sharp. While Chinelo probably pictured him in deep conversation with clients, he was waiting for another woman, ready to play the doting lover. The suspense hung in the air like the perfume of the roses, and the audience already knew. This dinner had nothing to do with business. Chinelo had always trusted her husband. For years she believed in his late nights, his endless business meetings, and the long phone calls he claimed were with clients. But lately, something in her spirit refused to rest. It started small, with a faint smell of perfume on his shirt that was too sweet, too feminine, too unfamiliar to be from his office. The first time she noticed it, she brushed it aside, convincing herself it must have been from brushing past a woman in a crowded place. But when it happened again and again, she felt her chest tighten with a truth she didn't want to face. She began to watch him more closely. Obinna, once careless with his phone, now carried it everywhere, even into the bathroom. He would step outside to take calls, his voice low, his words clipped. When she walked into the room, he ended conversations abruptly, claiming, "It's just work." But the way his eyes avoided hers told another story. Chinelo's heart ached, but she didn't rush to confront him. She knew if she burst out in anger, he would deny it, twist it, make her doubt herself. Instead, she chose silence, wearing her calmness like a mask while her mind worked in secret. She paid attention to the little things, the way he suddenly cared more about his clothes, how he hummed as he dressed, how he smiled at his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. Each detail was another crack in the picture of the husband she thought she knew. One evening, after Obinna had gone to shower, Chinelo's quiet patience brought her to the truth. His wallet, left carelessly on the dresser, held more than money. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling, as though she already knew what she would find. Tucked between receipts and business cards was a small slip of paper, a dinner reservation. The name of the restaurant was written in neat print, the date circled, and the time marked with precision. A reservation for 2. Her breath caught in her throat. It felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the paper, the walls around her closing in. This was no business dinner. This was romance, carefully planned, meant for someone else. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Crying would not change the truth written on that little piece of paper. In that moment, Chinelo felt 2 emotions wrestle inside her. Heartbreak pressed hard on her chest, whispering that the man she had given her life to had betrayed her. But alongside the pain came something steady, something stronger. Determination. If he thought she would stay blind, he was wrong. If he thought he could play her for a fool, he would learn otherwise. She folded the reservation neatly and slipped it back into the wallet, her face calm when he emerged from the bathroom. She even smiled, asking about his day, her voice steady though her heart was screaming. He answered as usual, smooth and casual, never guessing that she now knew his secret. Chinelo went to bed that night beside him, her body still but her mind awake, shaping a plan. She would not shout. She would not beg. She would not be humiliated in silence. If betrayal had walked into her home, she would find a way to meet it with dignity and strength. And as she closed her eyes, pretending to sleep, she whispered to herself, "Let him think I don't know." The storm was coming, and she would be ready. Amara stood in front of her mirror, a smile tugging at her lips as she adjusted her earring. Tonight was the night she had been waiting for. To her, this dinner meant more than just fine food or candlelight. It was a sign. A sign that Obinna was finally choosing her over his wife. She told herself that men didn't go to such lengths for just an affair. Rose petals, champagne, a luxury restaurant in the heart of Lagos. Those weren't the gestures of a man simply passing time. Those were the actions of a man ready to start fresh. With her, she ran her fingers over the silky fabric of her dress, a deep red that clung to her curves like it had been sewn on her body. Red was bold, red was passion, red was victory. She imagined Obinna's face when he saw her walk in, the way his eyes would light up, the way he would lean closer and whisper promises that belonged only to her. She picked out her perfume carefully, a fragrance she knew lingered long after she had left the room, a scent she believed marked her territory. Tonight, she wanted no trace of Chinelo in his mind. Tonight, she wanted to erase the wife completely. As she brushed her hair into soft waves, Amara's thoughts swirled with pride. She had won. She told herself Chinelo must already suspect, but what did that matter? A wife can suspect, but the mistress is the one sitting across from him at dinner, the one being celebrated. In her mind, Chinelo was yesterday's story, a woman who had grown too comfortable, too ordinary. Obinna needs a woman like me, she thought. Young, alive, exciting. Her heels clicked against the floor as she stepped back and looked at her reflection one more time. She didn't just see beauty staring back at her, she saw triumph. In her chest bloomed a dangerous kind of pride, the kind that whispered she had conquered someone else's territory and claimed it as her own. She even rehearsed what she would say if Obinna finally confessed he wanted to leave his wife. She would act surprised, pretend to hesitate, and then, with a gentle smile, accept. She had imagined that moment so many times it felt real already. On her bed, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Obinna. Can't wait to see you tonight. Her smile widened. He wasn't a man who wasted words, yet those simple lines made her feel like the queen of his world. She typed back playfully, I'll be the one in red. Don't keep me waiting. As she grabbed her purse and dabbed one last touch of lipstick, Amara felt untouchable. She didn't think of consequences or betrayal. She didn't worry about the cracks in her carefully built fantasy. To her, everything was aligning perfectly. In her imagination, the future looked golden. Her sitting at his side at family gatherings, her answering his phone late at night, her stepping into the role Chinelo had failed to fill. The irony was sharp and almost cruel. While Amara painted her lips and practiced her smile, the audience already knew the truth she couldn't see. Her red dress wasn't the mark of a queen rising but of pride before the fall. She walked out of her apartment that evening with her head high, certain she was walking into victory. But what waited at that restaurant was not the crown she imagined. It was the storm that would strip her mask away. Chinelo sat in her living room with the curtains drawn, the city lights of Lagos twinkling faintly through the window. Obinna was humming upstairs, getting ready for his business dinner. She had already memorized the time, the restaurant, and the name written neatly on that little reservation slip she found in his wallet. Every part of her wanted to scream, to demand answers, to throw the truth in his face. But Chinelo was not the type to waste her pain on shouting. She knew anger could be dismissed. What she wanted was truth, laid bare where no one could hide. As she sipped her tea, her mind kept circling back to Amara. She had heard the woman's name whispered before in her community. Amara wasn't single, and that was the part Obinna seemed to forget. Amara was married too, to Chike, a man Chinelo knew casually through church and mutual friends. He was well-respected, calm, and quiet, the kind of man who never made a fuss in public. But Chinelo wondered if he knew what his wife was doing in secret. The thought grew inside her until it became clear. If Obinna wanted to play this game in the dark, then she would bring everything into the light. That evening, after Obinna had left, Chinelo picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She didn't have Chike's number, but she knew exactly who could give it to her without asking too many questions. Within a few minutes, she had the number saved, her heart pounding as she stared at it. Dialing those digits felt heavier than anything she had ever done. But when the line rang and his deep voice answered, she found her strength. Good evening, Chike, she began, her tone polite, steady. This is Chinelo, Obinna's wife. There was silence on the line, and then a cautious, good evening, Ma. How are you? Chinelo took a deep breath. I think we should talk. It concerns Amara. The pause that followed said everything. His voice, calm but tight, replied, I'm listening. She explained slowly, carefully, not with spite but with precision. She told him about the dinner reservation, the restaurant, the time. She didn't accuse, she didn't insult. She simply laid out the facts like pieces on a chessboard. Chike didn't interrupt much, but she could hear his breathing change, the heaviness in it. When she finally said, I thought you deserved to know, his voice dropped lower, steady but burning with controlled fury. Thank you, Chinelo, he said. I'll be there. When she ended the call, her hands trembled, but her face was calm. She wasn't sure what the night would bring. She only knew she would no longer be the quiet wife waiting at home while lies were dressed up as business meetings. She was done being sidelined in her own marriage. That night she lay in bed beside Obinna as he pretended to scroll through his phone, pretending to be busy. He had no idea she had set the stage for the biggest reveal of his life. The irony filled her chest with a strange kind of power. While he thought he was in control, carefully weaving lies, she was already pulling at the thread that would unravel everything. The suspense built in her veins like a drumbeat. Tomorrow, at that dinner table, there would be no hiding. Not for Obinna. Not for Amara. And with Chike walking into the room at her side, the chaos would belong to them, not her. Chinelo closed her eyes, whispering a prayer for courage, knowing the storm was no longer approaching. She had invited it herself. The restaurant glowed with warmth that evening. Soft candlelight flickered on every table, the golden flames dancing against polished wine glasses. A live band played slow, romantic music in the corner, the kind of songs that made couples lean closer and smile at each other. Waiters moved gracefully, carrying trays of champagne and delicate plates of food. Everything about the place whispered love, not business. Obinna arrived first. He wore his favorite dark suit, the one that made him feel powerful and sharp. In his hand, he carried a bouquet of fresh red roses, their scent filling the air around him. He checked his watch, his lips curving into a smile as he imagined Amara walking through the door in one of her bold dresses. For a moment, he leaned back in his chair, letting the music wash over him, believing this night would be perfect. When Amara finally walked in, heads turned. Her red dress clung to her like it had been made for her alone, her heels clicking against the marble floor as though announcing her arrival. Obinna stood quickly, his eyes lighting up, and he walked forward to meet her. He held out the roses, his smile wide, his voice soft. "For you," he said. She laughed, tilting her head with practiced grace, and took them, inhaling deeply. "You always know how to make me feel special," Amara said, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "And you deserve it," Obinna replied smoothly, guiding her to the table. They sat close, their chairs angled toward each other, their hands brushing as they reached for the menus. The waiter poured champagne into their glasses, the bubbles rising like tiny sparks of celebration. They clinked glasses softly, their eyes locked in a way that made it clear they were not hiding from anyone tonight. Amara leaned across the table, her voice low and playful. "Do you know how long I've waited for this? A proper dinner, just the two of us. No rushing, no excuses." Obinna chuckled, lowering his voice too, as if sharing a delicious secret. "And you know I would give you more if I could. Tonight is just the beginning." Her laughter rang softly, and she reached for his hand, squeezing it as though sealing a promise. To them, the world outside didn't matter. In that moment, it was only the music, the roses, and the candlelight painting their faces in gold. What they didn't know was that two other figures were already inside the restaurant, moving closer with every step. Chinelo walked slowly, her face calm, her eyes sharp. She wore a simple but elegant dress, not flashy like Amara's, but graceful in a way that drew quiet respect. Beside her walked Chike, tall and composed, though the tension in his jaw revealed the storm brewing inside him. The waiters, the diners, even the band had no idea what was about to unfold. The room hummed with romance, but the air carried an undercurrent, a quiet tension no one could name yet. Obinna and Amara, locked in their little bubble of stolen affection, didn't notice the shift. They didn't see how the evening, so carefully planned, was about to collapse. As Chinelo and Chike drew nearer to the corner table, their footsteps silent on the polished floor, the perfect picture of romance was seconds away from shattering. The calm was almost too beautiful, like the last deep breath before a storm breaks the sky wide open. Obinna was mid-laugh when he heard the sound of heels stopping right beside his table. He turned, still holding Amara's hand, and his smile froze. Standing there was Chinelo, his wife, her eyes calm but sharp, her posture straight as if she had rehearsed this moment 100 times. Beside her was Chike, tall and silent, his presence heavy with something no one at the table could ignore. For a second, Obinna couldn't move. His throat tightened, his fingers slipped from Amara's hand. The entire restaurant seemed to hush, as if the music had lowered itself to listen. Chinelo leaned slightly toward her husband, her voice smooth but cutting like glass. "I thought business dinners were supposed to include business partners?" The words dropped like a stone in water, rippling through the silence. People at nearby tables turned their heads, forks paused midair. Obinna's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Before he could form an excuse, Chike's voice cut in, deep and steady, directed at Amara. "Wife," he said, his jaw tight. "What are you doing here?" The word wife rang louder than the clinking glasses around them. Amara's painted smile collapsed. Her lips parted, but no words came, only a gasp. Her hand trembled on the table. The roses Obinna had given her now looking like a mockery in front of everyone. "Chike, I can explain," she stammered, reaching out toward him, but he stepped back, his face hard. Obinna finally found his voice, though it shook. "Chinelo, it's not what it looks like." She raised her hand, silencing him without raising her voice. "Then do tell, Obinna. Because it looks like roses, champagne, and candlelight with another man's wife." A sharp murmur ran through the restaurant. Diners whispered, some covering their mouths, others openly staring. The band stopped playing, their instruments going silent as the tension swallowed the room. Amara shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between Obinna and Chike, panic rising in her throat. "Please, it's not what you think." Chike's voice thundered over hers, low but fierce. "Not what I think. You're my wife, Amara. And you're here, dressed like this, holding hands with another man. His eyes turned briefly to Obinna, burning. A married man. Obinna dropped his gaze, his smooth confidence gone, his hands clenching on the tablecloth. Chike, let's not cause a scene. Chinelo's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of joy but of quiet strength. The scene is already here, Obinna. You created it. Amara tried to rise, her voice shaky. Chike, please just listen. Sit down, he commanded, his tone so sharp that the tables nearby flinched. She froze, lowering back into her chair, her eyes glistening. The silence was suffocating. Every diner held their breath, waiting for what would come next. Obinna shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar, sweat forming on his brow. Chinelo, let's talk about this at home. Not here. But Chinelo stood tall, her eyes never leaving his. Home is where you bring honesty, Obinna. Lies belong here tonight, in public, where everyone can see them for what they are. Gasps rippled again, the whispers louder now, waiters frozen in place with trays in hand. Obinna's perfect evening had crumbled in seconds. The champagne sat untouched, the roses mocked Amara from the table, and the candlelight that once felt romantic now threw long, harsh shadows across faces full of betrayal. The storm had broken wide open, and there was no going back. Amara's lips trembled as she tried to gather her words. The silence pressing on her shoulders was heavier than anything she had ever felt. Dozens of eyes were on her, waiting for her to explain, to justify, to wriggle her way out of what was already obvious. She straightened her back, forcing a smile that looked more like a crack in her face. Chike, please, she whispered, her voice soft, almost pleading. It's not what it looks like. You've misunderstood. Obinna and we were only meeting to discuss. She paused, searching for something that sounded believable. To discuss business. That single word fell flat, and the irony stung the air. Chinelo's calm gaze flicked toward her, then to Obinna, who suddenly realized the trap he had walked into. His wife hadn't stumbled on this by accident. She had orchestrated it, every detail, every step. For the first time in his life, Obinna had no words. He could only sit there, jaw tight, hands gripping the table, watching the walls close in. Chike let out a bitter laugh that startled even the waiters standing by. Business. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, his voice sharp enough to cut through the room. So my wife, dressed in a red dress that looks like sin itself, holding roses from another man, clinking champagne glasses under candlelight. This is business? Whispers broke out like wildfire across the restaurant. Couples leaned into each other, murmuring, eyes wide with disbelief. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads. The humiliation spread like smoke, wrapping itself tightly around Amara until she couldn't breathe. Chike, I swear it's not, she tried again, but he cut her off with a thunder that silenced the entire room. Enough! His fist slammed the table so hard the glasses rattled. I have been faithful to you, Amara. I have given you a home, respect, my name. And this is how you repay me? Sneaking around like a thief in the night? Pretending to be virtuous in church while living a lie? His voice cracked on the last word, not from weakness but from fury mixed with heartbreak. Amara's mask crumbled completely. Her eyes darted wildly, desperate for an escape. She turned to Obinna, reaching for his hand, hoping he would say something, anything to save her. But Obinna sat frozen, trapped between the piercing stare of his wife and the fiery rage of Chike. His silence was the loudest betrayal of all. Obinna, Amara whispered, her voice shaking, say something. Tell them it's not what they think. But Obinna couldn't. He looked at Chinelo, who stood tall and silent, her calm presence making him feel smaller than he had ever felt in his life. He realized then that she had known, she had planned, and she had led him straight into this ambush. His clever lies, his carefully arranged dinner, all of it looked foolish now. The restaurant's whispers grew louder. Some diners gasped, some chuckled under their breath, others shook their heads in pity. The once romantic corner now looked like a stage where shame and betrayal played out under candlelight. Amara's shoulders sagged. Her arrogance, the pride she carried when she dressed for this night, vanished completely. She was no longer the woman who believed she had won. She was exposed, humiliated, and powerless. And as she sat there, trapped between a furious husband and a silent lover who refused to defend her, Amara understood what the audience had known all along. Her victory had never been real. It was only the beginning of her fall. The room was heavy with silence after Chike's outburst. Amara sat trembling, her mask torn away. Obinna kept his head down, his confidence gone, his hands sweating against the table. The whispers around them grew louder, the entire restaurant now an audience to their shame. And then slowly Chinelo stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam the table. She didn't need to. The calm in her eyes carried more weight than any scream could. She stood tall, her dress simple yet regal, her dignity untouched. When she finally spoke, her words carried across the room like the steady rhythm of a drum. Obinna, she began, her tone steady. I gave you my trust. I gave you my years. I stood by you when you had nothing, when all we had was each other. All I asked in return was honesty. Not perfection, not riches, just truth. Her husband's eyes flickered up at her, but he couldn't hold her gaze. His lips trembled, but he stayed silent. Chinelo continued, her voice unwavering. But instead of honesty, you chose humiliation. You brought lies into our home and dressed them up as business dinners. You turned your back on the vows we made, and you thought I would never see. The room was so quiet that even the candles seemed to lean toward her words. Some women in the audience shifted in their seats, their eyes glistening, as if her pain echoed their own. Chinelo took a breath, her hands folded in front of her, her calmness more powerful than anger. You betrayed me, Obinna, she said, her voice soft but cutting. But I will not betray myself. I will not lower myself to shouting, to begging, to clinging to someone who does not value me. My worth is not measured by how well I endure your deceit. Gasps rippled across the restaurant, some nods, some murmurs of approval. Obinna swallowed hard, his face pale, his pride collapsing in front of strangers. She glanced briefly at Amara, whose eyes were filled with tears, her once bold smile gone. Then Chinelo looked back at her husband, her words carrying the weight of finality. If you wanted her, you could have told me. If you wanted to leave, you could have spoken. I would have mourned, I would have healed. But you chose lies, and lies always drag shame behind them. Obinna opened his mouth as if to explain, but nothing came. He had no defense, not in front of her, not in front of Chike, not in front of the crowd who had seen everything. Chinelo's expression softened, not with forgiveness but with clarity. I will not carry this shame for you. It belongs to you, Obinna. It belongs to both of you. Her eyes shifted briefly to Amara before settling back on her husband. As for me, I will walk out of here with my head high. Because I may have been betrayed, but I refuse to be broken. Her words hung in the air, heavy and powerful. Some diners actually clapped softly, moved by her strength. Others wiped their eyes, whispering to their companions about her courage. Obinna sat in silence, his shoulders heavy, his world collapsing in the very place he thought he was safe. Amara bowed her head, her pride shattered into pieces. And Chinelo, without raising her voice, without shedding a single tear, stood in that restaurant like a queen stripped of nothing, her dignity shining brighter than the candlelight. The restaurant never quite returned to normal that night. Even after the music tried to start again, even after the waiters moved awkwardly between tables, the whispers refused to die down. Obinna sat there, his face pale, his mind racing, but every pair of eyes in the room was already judging him. What made it worse was that several of his business associates happened to be dining there too. Men he had boasted to, men who respected him for his integrity and family values, now stared at him with disgust. One of them muttered loud enough for others to hear. So this is the kind of man he really is? The damage to his reputation was done. No amount of money or power could erase the shame of being caught this way, in public, by his own wife. Amara's world crumbled just as fast. Chike's expression was carved in stone, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with fury and heartbreak. He didn't shout again. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than anger. He looked at her one last time, shaking his head slowly. You made your choice, Amara, and it was not me. Those words pierced deeper than any insult. Amara reached out, her hands trembling, her voice begging. Chike, please don't leave me. I was foolish, I was blinded, But he pulled his arm away before she could touch him. In front of everyone, he turned and walked out, leaving her behind. The click of the door as he exited sounded like the final nail in her marriage. The humiliation crushed her. The woman who had dressed like a queen hours earlier now sat wilted in her chair, her roses lying forgotten on the table, her eyes swollen with tears. She had believed she was stepping into victory, but she had been stripped bare instead, her pride trampled under the weight of truth. Obinna tried to speak to Chinelo then, his words stumbling. Chinelo, please let's go home and talk. His voice was desperate, his mask completely gone. But she didn't even look at him. She stood gracefully, smoothing the fabric of her dress, her face calm as though she were above the chaos around her. She turned to the crowd, nodding politely at those who had witnessed everything, as though acknowledging them as silent witnesses to her pain and her strength. Then she walked past Obinna without a word, her heels clicking softly, her back straight, her head high. She didn't cry. She didn't falter. She left the table of betrayal exactly as it was, two broken people staring at the ruins of their choices. Every step she took toward the door felt like a victory of its own. She wasn't walking away defeated, she was walking away free. And the people in the restaurant knew it. They watched her with admiration, their whispers shifting from shock to respect. Some even clapped softly as she disappeared into the night, her dignity untouched. Behind her, Obinna slumped in his chair, the weight of his ruined reputation pressing down like a mountain. His business partners exchanged looks that said everything. Trust was broken, respect was gone. For a man who thrived on image, this public shame was a death blow. Amara, left alone at the table, buried her face in her hands, her sobs echoing softly in the once romantic corner. She had lost her husband, her pride, her illusion. She was not the winner she imagined. She was the cautionary tale. And Chinelo, without raising her voice, without shedding a tear, was the only one who walked out whole. The days after the restaurant scene were quiet for Chinelo, but they were not heavy. For the first time in years, she felt a strange lightness in her chest. The betrayal had hurt, yes, but the worst part was over. She no longer carried the weight of wondering, of second-guessing, of trying to hold together a marriage that had already slipped from her hand. Now, she had only herself to care for, and that was enough. She started small. She poured her time into things she had once set aside. Morning walks by the lagoon. Books she had left unread. Her little side business she had dreamed of expanding, but never had the courage to push forward. She invested in herself, not just with money, but with attention, with love, with patience. She refused to let betrayal be the end of her story. Instead, it became the turning point. People in the community whispered about what had happened, but when they saw her, they didn't see shame. They saw strength. They saw a woman who had walked into the fire and come out shining. Chinelo carried herself with grace, never speaking ill of Obinna or Amara, but never denying the truth either. She didn't need revenge. The truth had already done its work. And as the narrator's voice closes on her story, it leaves a line that lingers, the kind of line that cuts deep and stays with the audience long after the scene fades. When betrayal enters through lies, truth has a way of crashing the party uninvited. The words echo like a final curtain call. The audience can't help but clap, some with tears in their eyes, not for the pain, but for the strength of a woman who refused to let betrayal define her. Chinelo's new life had just begun.